I'm Preston Miller. I'm the statewide railroad liaison. I don't have a lot to say here. There's just a few slides, but the idea is basically if you have a project that's going to come close to a railroad, it's very important that you get that coordination started early, and so that's what I'm here for, to hopefully help. So far I've been here about 6 months, and there are a lot of different issues that arise, so it's very good to try to get started as early as you can. On this slide, review the project scoping and designs on railroad right-of-way to minimize project impact. If there is a way that you can alter any designs or plan accordingly to not have to hit the right-of-way, basically a 25-foot corridor. If you're going to be within that corridor for any reason, then you need to talk to me. We need to get started on coordination. Different railroads, UP and BNSF are the two Class 2 railroads, and those will take the majority of the time. The other 22 are Class 2 railroads, which are more local and have local representation. They can sometimes get through the process quicker. So the process is that you generally have to start a PE letter, preliminary engineering letter, so that the railroad has an opportunity to do their design for any questions, any part of the project that they need to be able to provide answers in what we need. And so I submit the plans to them and start a PE process. And then from that point on, I coordinate and facilitate the meetings in coordination with the railroad as much as I can. But it is a lengthy process. Try to keep conflicts to a minimum and ultimately be a single point of contact for the railroads between you and the project and me and the railroads. However, there are instances where I do not get involved with permits of entry or rights of entry. If you're surveying or any other discipline that needs to be within that corridor, it is the region's responsibility to coordinate the right of entry or permit of entry, but I can point you in the right direction. It's primarily, the world is agreements in the railroad world. Actually the acquisition process, even though I'm a right-of-way agent, the acquisition process is really a small portion. It's probably under 5% of what I do, just because the number of acquisitions from the railroad are pretty small. And if you do have an acquisition, it's never for what it appraises for. They have their own system of coming up with the cost, and it usually is to cover any costs they have. They don't want any out-of-pocket dollars. So the other process is a crossing order, and that's not by me, that's our rail department. But I do work closely with the rail department because generally sometimes if the crossing order is needed, then there's also some other kinds of coordination, which flagging agreements are notoriously needed. As I said, the right of entry, I can point you in the right direction for right of entries. They basically all have websites. And to be within that corridor, you have to be certified. You have to have safety training. They don't want any disruption to their operation, and they don't want any injuries. So it's very important that we follow those rules. As I said, Class 1 railroads and the Class 2 railroads, different processes. A little bit to keep in mind for the time frame. Plan reviews, that has changed. That's for UP, for the two Class 1 railroads, pretty much expect 4 to 6 months. And 6 months more accurate than 4. If a C&M agreement is needed, which would be needed if there is any acquisition, right-of-way acquisition, that could be about a year to a year and a half process. So crossing orders, C&M agreements are the two longest duration processes that you will run into, and they'll plan on a year to a year and a half for that. Once the initial coordination begins, so once the plans are at a stage where we send them to the railroad, that's when the timeline starts. And make sure and contact Rail Division. Rick Schenkel is the supervisor over there, and he can give you any answers if you're gonna alter a crossing. That's my contact information. Thank you very much.